Right, welcome back to another web development video where I show you how to make modern websites using HTML5, CSS3, and a little bit of JavaScript. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this layout. So this is a pretty common magazine layout, a full spread, where you see an image with maybe the title or some sort of intro text on the left, and then the article on the right, with maybe a lead or some sort of subhead over here. This sort of thing could be on this page with just a full screen, a full bleed image, either way. And then this will be what it is on a desktop size, and this will be what it reduces down to on the like an iPad size, and then this would be for a mobile size, a phone. We're going to use CSS Grid, and we're going to use I think CSS columns too, in order to make these columns a little bit more responsive. But yeah, it's a very common sort of layout, and something that you can implement really easily, I think, into any sort of blog template or into an article page or something like that, a case study, that sort of thing. So let's jump into CodePen. It was based on, let's see, I don't know if I still have the inspiration for that. I just pull up an instance of this. So this is one that I'd seen before. This is a way more minimalist sort of idea here. Here's another instance of it where you see, you know, the full image over here, and then you just have your article over here. So this is I could probably show you 2 or 3 more pretty easily. Here's one. So you can see it again. So there's an image over here, sort of an editorial image on this one, and then it has the text over here. So this is a really common style for a magazine type of layout, and we're just going to recreate that for the web. So that's good. Let's kind of zone in on our iPhone size here, and we're just going to go with a background image here. It's going to make overlaying this text a lot easier. You could also make this just an image file, and then use something like an object that CSS property to make sure that it fits full bleed cover to cover, or viewport across the viewport width. But we're just going to use a background. So we have 2 distinct areas, and we need to, when you start thinking about grid, you start thinking about responsive grids across different viewport widths. And you have to kind of take into account how you're building the site. It needs to be able to accept and fit all of these instances. So designing mobile first is really good, but when you know that your design is going to be so far removed from this single column layout, you really need to think about, how do I need to structure my HTML in order to achieve this layout here? And then if my HTML allows me to achieve this layout as well, and this layout, then we have our optimal HTML. We don't have to change anything in the source code. Then we're just changing the CSS properties and values. So hopefully, if you get a design like this from a designer, the designer has given you multiple instances, at least something like, you know, having this or having this would be really helpful in order to be able to process this all the way through for mobile all the way to desktop. So if they don't give you that, if you just have this, then you're going to have to maybe sketch these out to see, you know, how do I want to approach this, because I haven't done anything super differently. I've changed the column sizes, and space here is different. you can see I've pulled this up a little bit on the iPad size, pulled it back down a little bit over here because it just didn't fit very well up there. And then I've centered some of this text, and this is just one column now. So just kind of thinking through all the different variations and what you could do with each of these. You know, you need to decide margins, and you need to decide columns, and you need to decide, you know, what am I going to do with this? Is it going to go as an offset over here and then all the text down one side of the page, or will it be a traditional block quote where you have it kind of inside and all the text flows around it? So you just got to try to think about things like that before you get into writing your HTML. And so we can see here, because we're going to have a 2-column layout here, so 2 major columns, right? So the image, this header section is going to be over here, and then our text section is going to be over here. So we want to make sure that our top level HTML, we have a header, and then we have sort of a main section with our text. And that's going to allow us to use CSS Grid in order to separate these two. And on the screen, it's going to be, you know, half of it's going to be the image and the other half is going to be the text. So that's hopefully what we're going to get to at the end. And so we think about our our layout here, and we're going to have, I'm just going to create kind of a wrapper class called app, and then inside of that I'm going to say I'm going to have a header, and I'm also going to have an article. So the article is going to be our text, so article text, and then article header, and then inside the header we're going to have a background image, but we're going to have an internal div, and it's going to hold all of this information here. So we're going to call that article header text, and then inside of that we'll have an H1 that says Marley's Ghost. And then we'll have an H2 that's our byline. And if you're familiar with a newspaper or magazine, the byline is just by whoever the author is, right? So we'll say by Charles Dickens. Okay, so we have our text here, and we're going to insert, once we get to the CSS, we'll insert our CSS into the article header. It's important to have all of this wrapped in its own div, because then we'll be able to control all of the positioning all together. We won't have to do this positioning and then replicate it with this positioning. So we'll be able to control these elements individually, and then we'll be able to control them all as a group as well. So thinking in terms of groups and boxes really will help you with laying out your HTML. Okay, our article text is going to have it might be best, but we won't necessarily need a lot of CSS Grid necessarily for this section here. We could use Grid to control the layout, but we can also use just regular elements just as well. Excuse me. So let's go ahead, and because we're going to use not Grid for this, we're going to use CSS columns for this. So let's go ahead and make this sort of just generic HTML. So we're going to call it an aside that's called article lead. And stay consistent. Article text lead. And the lead is just a little subhead or whatever it is that brings in the article. So I'm just going to copy this, and we'll make this an H3. Okay, so you can see it takes the styles here. And then for our next section, we're just going to have our main article section. And that's going to be called, we'll just call it article. I guess that makes sense. Article text content. And that's going to be a series of p tags. And let's get this one because it has the full story. The other one I had to break up for the sake of just showing you the different columns. There's no column structure that I know of in Adobe XD. So we get all of our paragraphs here, and so now we have the beginnings. This is just super basic sort of article with a header, a headline, a byline, a subhead or a lead, and then this is the actual article itself. And I think that we have all of our HTML elements. We have our article, lead, headline, and then we're going to insert the background image here. So you can see that we're pretty close over here. We just have to do some styling up here in the header section especially, but also a little bit down here. I'm going to go ahead and set a little bit better font. So in CodePen, when you come to it's not this, it's in the assets. If you come to your assets panel, you get a lot of different things here. You can upload different files. You can get access to Unsplash photos. You can have patterns, and then there's some preloaded icons as well, and also preloaded fonts. So you can come in here and choose a font, and I'm just going to go with, I think Open Sans is going to look okay. And so I'm just going to import that into my CSS. So I'll just copy that link, and it imports the Google font into my CSS. And then I'm also going to copy the font family. You could also choose to put it in the head of your document, and you would click this and then go to your settings under the HTML, and then you put it here, and that would be that would give you, it's like putting something in the head of the HTML document. But we're going to come down and we're going to say body HTML. We'll just put Open Serif or Open Sans as the body font. It should be okay. Going back to our grid layout here. So we have an image, and this image is going to be a background image. I am going to upload that image because I'm using it here in CodePen. I'm pretty sure I don't have that image already uploaded. So let me just upload that real quick. And my new folder, and it's going to be one of these first images here. Where is it? There it is. Oh, it's telling me it's too big. Okay, well, let's just look for a photo. Doesn't have to be that one particularly. So let's see, forest. I'm just trying to think of one that would be good with our image. Actually, that's a good chance to show you what I do. I have a little program here called Faststone Photo Resizer. Let's try to open it up. Faststone Image Viewer, that's what it is. And it's a free download. It's sort of an old program. But what it does is it gives you some tools to like quickly make edits to images. So if you, a lot of times I want to take a screenshot or something like that, and I just want to be able to do it really quickly. And it's not always easy with some tools, and so I've downloaded this to sort of just give me, you know, some options to do screen capture and that sort of thing. But it also has a nice just basic image editing. So here's the image that we want, and then we can resize it, which is the problem. That's the main problem that we're having, is the size of the image. So you can see how many megapixels it is, and we're just going to resize it down to like 1500. And then I'm also going to, well, let's just see if that works. So, assets is where I want to be, and I want to choose my files. And so we have our resized one here. Let's see if it allows that. Okay, so that's pretty good. So you can see that this is our image here, and then we're just going to copy that URL, and we're going to come in and start working with our CSS a little bit. Our article header is where we need to put the background image. So article header, and we're going to say a background image with a URL, and then we're just going to insert our URL that we use. You can see that it's showing up now. One of the reasons that it's not showing up very well is because we haven't given this background, or this article header, we haven't given it an explicit height. So it is only taking the height of whatever this is. So if we put margin or padding on this element here, it would expand and show us more of the image. We can also decide the height if we want. So we can make the height of this image. If we go back to here, this is the baseline of our phone. So we can see that the image is probably 60% or 70%. We can just put 60 viewport heights, and that gets us pretty close to what we were looking at. You can see that we're only seeing the very top left corner of the image. We're only seeing this part up here. So we need to find a way to get our image into the frame, and the way that we do that is with position, and then we're just going to say center, and that centers it. But right now the image is still huge. It's all, you know, it's coming out to the side, but it's getting cut off. So what we want to do is we want to say background size is cover. Okay, and then what cover does is it pulls it down to fit the size of our box, and you can see when we resize that it begins to resize it based on based on the size of the viewport. Okay. So right here, we've reached some maximum with the image, and then we have to, it begins to blow it up for us. So that allows us to have the image where we want to inside of the inside of this box, inside of this rectangle. But as we get bigger, or as the viewport gets wider, we're going to have to create more space down here so that we see more of the image. Okay, you can also see that our text is moving with our image. You can see that it's stuck in the top left of the image. That's not exactly where we want it to be, but it's not that bad. And what I want to do is I want to control this by saying we're going to make it position absolute. And we're going to get a little bit more fine-grained control of that header element. So we'll say article, header, text, and we're going to call it position absolute. And then we're going to say top, 0, left, 0, and then you can see that it's going outside of it's inside this element here, but it's actually positioned itself to the viewport width, or the viewport window. And the reason that that is happening is because its parent element, the element that we want it to be absolutely positioned to, does not have a declared relative positioning. So anytime you use absolute positioning, you need to go up a level to its parent. So we're here, and we need to go up a level to its parent, which is here, and then add position, an explicit position relative. So it's every element, and you can see now that it's positioned itself to the top and the left of this element, not the viewport width or the window. So every element has it's an implicit position relative, unless you change it to absolute or fixed. But if you want absolute positioning to work, you have to have the parent element explicitly position relative, and then whatever child element that you want to position around that element, then you have to be able to add position absolute to that. CSS positioning is one of the harder things to understand at the very beginning, but as you understand it more, and just sort of the general principles of how it works, it gets easier, and you can do some more fine-grained types of controls. Let's go ahead and style our text first. So H1 and H2, we're going to call color of white. What else do we have? So our H1 we can see is 2 rem at this size. So we're gonna actually call its class here. So I'll just copy that, and we'll call the class, and we'll say text transform of uppercase, because it is. And we're also going to do a font size. So font size is 2 rem, which gives us exactly what we have. And then our line height is actually going to be, if we see here, our line height is also 2. Actually, I think that's 1. Sorry. If it's the same size as the font size, then the line height is 1. And we're not going to see it until it gets scrunched up. So you'll be able to see it there when it gets all scrunched up. And we're going to control the width of this element so that it will be scrunched up a little bit. And then the article header byline is our H2, and we're going to say font weight of 400, and we're going to say font size of 1.1, I believe. Maybe 1.1 rem. Let's see if that, I think that's pretty close. Well, I think we have 18 pixels there for that. Oh, 14 pixels, so that's like a 0.9 or 0.8. Say 0.9. Okay, and now we need to position that over here. Remember, we're working for our mobile styles. So we're going to take our article header text, and we're actually going to not do left, we're going to say right. So this positions it to the right, at the 0 point on the right. And then we also want to make sure that this text is text aligned to the right, text align, sorry. And so now we have our text aligned to the right, just like we have here, and then we just need to control the spacing a little bit better. So instead of 0 and 0 on top, let's just do right of 1 rem and then top of 1 rem, and see where that gets us. That's pretty good. And let's control the width. We'll say the max width of this element is going to be 30%. Okay, that's not right. Let's say 40. Okay, that's a little bit better. So the maximum width is going to be 40%, and you can see that it's stuck at the top right of our section. I don't like that I'm getting this margin all the way around. CodePen does this. So if we just do a margin of 0, now we have a full bleed image. You can see that that's what we have here. Is a full, if it's full bleed, there's no margin around it. Now we do have margin down here, and we'll be able to control that with our article text property, or article text class. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm relatively happy with that. There's some margin issues here. That's a little bit ticky-tack, so we could say margin bottom of 0, and that pulls it up a little bit. So you just get rid of the margin on the H1. And alright, I think that's good for our mobile style for our header so far. So let's start working on our text down here. So we have our article text, and like I said, we can control the margin of our article text by saying, I'm going to use padding on the inside and just say 1 rem of padding, and that gives us a little bit of space here to work with. So it allows us to have a full bleed image here, and then this element has some padding, which allows us to control the spacing of our text. I think that's pretty good for now. I think I had a background color while I'm thinking about it. I have a background color on the canvas of this. Let me go ahead and do that while I'm thinking about it. We should put that on the body. So we would do background color of this, and just changes our background color just a very, very hint of gray, which gives it just a little bit more of a styled look and not quite as pow in your face. Okay. And let's deal with this. This is our article text lead, and let's just copy that class. And this is going to be a font weight of I'm going to add in a font weight here. I believe there's a 300 as well for this. So I'm just going to add that in and see if that works. Let's see. So let's just do a search for Open Sans. And then we'll see what weights we have here. We have a light 300 and a light italic 600, 700, 800. Okay, so there should be the ability to get this. Let me see how they have it here. So Open Sans 300. Okay, well, that should work. And let's go back and we'll see. Font family, Open Sans 300. But for some reason it's not pulling it in. Ah, I see, because we put it on the div. You see, we've named the div, but we didn't name the H3. So we have to go down and we have to make sure that we put that style onto the H3. Okay, so now we get it. What happened was I was just applying it to the div, and you can't apply a font weight to a div element. So you have to apply that to the actual element itself. So if it's a p tag or one of your heading tags or something like that, you have to apply it to the direct element that's being affected. Sometimes that happens with color and some other things as well, line height and things like that. So you want to apply it directly to this element itself. And we'll have to remember that when we get down here as well. So our H3 is 300. That's our font weight, and it's going to be text aligned to the center. And we also want to make sure that we create this padding. Okay, so this is okay, so we have about 2 rem of padding on each side, and maybe 3 on the top and bottom. So let's start with that. We'll say padding. We'll put this on the actual div element. So we'll say padding of 3 rem top and bottom, and 2 rem on the sides. And that feels a little bit spacious to me. That feels better. And this is a little bit like going to the eye doctor. It's like, is this better or is this better? Is this better or this better? This still has a lot of margin on it. So you can see that when we get rid of the margin and we say margin of 0, then it's going to change everything. So we can just do that, and then now we'll have a little bit better control over over our spacing here. So you can choose however you want it. If you like this is sort of how it's going to show up. And so if this is how you want it to be, that's one thing. If you want it to be a little bit wider like this, and you get kind of a rounded sort of thing going on, just remember that it's going to look a certain way when you go out. Our design here is pretty spacious, but not necessarily on the sides, mostly on the top and bottom. So that looks fine. It looks like we're getting sort of what the design was calling for. And then the line height is going to be like 1.5. So let's say the H3 line height is going to be 1.5. And that gives us just a little bit more space. It opens it up a little bit more as like feature sort of text. Okie dokie. And then I think that's really what we have. The text is just sort of basic, and not very exciting. It's going to be 1 rem by by default, or it's going to be 16 pixels, I guess, which is equal to 1 rem. Or 1 rem is going to be 16 pixels. But what I want to do is I want to control the line height a little bit for this. So I say line height of 1.5 and see where that gets me. And that's a little bit better. We'll say 1.4 maybe. So just gives us a little bit of spread out text. Let's see if it's any different. So it looks like 1.4 is the default. So if you wanted to spread it out even a little bit more, it begins to compete with this, though. That's the issue that I have. So we'll just leave it like it is at 1.4. Oh. Yeah, we'll leave it like it is at 1.4 and just move on from that. Okay, so I think as far as our mobile first is concerned, our mobile size is concerned, I think we have that now. And we can move on to the iPad size. You can see that this iPad size hits at 768, so we'll just go ahead and we'll make our styles for that size, or maybe a little bit smaller. And what we need to do is, let's say it's 700. So you can see that this is what we're going to have for like a phablet sort of thing. And I really want some things to start changing, maybe at 600 pixels. That's where I really want to start making some changes. Let's get down to that size. This is all feeling a little bit too small for me. So what we do is we come up to our header, and remember our article header is the one with the background. And let's put in a media query at this point. And we'll say at media and a minimum width of 600 pixels. We're going to do something to the article header. And the thing that I want to change first is this height element. So I don't want it to be 60, I want it to go to 80. And you can see that it gives us a lot more of the image to be shown here once we get to 600. So this is small, and then all of a sudden it pops out and gives us more. It feels like we're even a little bit closer in on this this young woman who's at the waterfall. And this is feeling very small, so let's grow our article header title and our article header byline. So I'm just going to take this and copy it and come to the title, and we'll say article header title, and we'll give it a font size of, I think it's the same between these two, so 84. And the way to figure that out is our base font size is 16, so 84 divided by 16 is 5.25, so you could do that. So it's going to be 5.25 rem. And now you can see that it's changed some other things because we have that width, right? So we're going to have to, let's just copy this, and we'll come up under there, and then we'll come after this element and we'll say article header text, and then we're gonna give it the max width. Let's just say width of auto and see where that gets us. So just changing these values till they get to sort of the place that we want. Okay, you could even do 100% here, and it would probably be okay. I don't think it's going to move. You can see that. But we're going to give it a maximum width of not 100%, but a maximum width of, let's say, 60% at this point, and that's going to give us sort of what we're looking for from one size to the next. We get a little funkiness up in here. You can control that by giving it more max width, I guess. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And then our text down here is going to be 24, which is like 1.5 rem. So we take this, come down to our byline, and we say this. We can just copy all this. So at this size, we don't need to control the font weight anymore. We just need to control the font size, and we're going to say 1.5 rem. Okay. So that's looking a lot better at 600 pixels. And you might think it's a little bit large, but remember what we've designed for is right here. So when we design for it right here, it doesn't look nearly as bad. Some devices are going to be at 600. Most devices are going to be larger than that if they're tablets. So now we're controlling the spacing really well here, and is there anything different? We need to control the alignment. So we're going to text align to the right. It's going to be a width of 100%, and then we're also going to control the padding a little bit more. So you can see there's not as much space top and bottom as there is when it gets to the tablet size. So let's control the spacing and change this a little bit. Again, we copy this, and we're gonna put it on this element here. So let's get this. We are going to do the padding, and instead of 2 rem, we're going to say back to what we originally thought, which was 3 and 2. And then we're also going to make it text align to the right, which we're going to need to place on our H3, I guess. So then we say H3, and yeah, okay. So that takes care of our H3 element. You can see that there's quite a bit more space around this, and that we're getting a nice right justified, and with some space around it. Alright, so that's looking pretty good right now. And we might want to change the size. I don't remember if we changed the size. So this is 18 and this is 24, so we did. So it bumps up the size a little bit. And so we put that on our H3, and we say font size of 1.5 rem. Okay, so it goes up a little bit. And lastly, we need to work with our text. So you can see here that by the time we get to 768 pixels, we have 2 columns here. And the way that we're going to handle that is we're going to go down to our article text content, and we're going to make this whole div. We're going to give it CSS columns. So I don't know if you've ever worked with CSS columns or not, but we're not going to call this until we get to 600 pixels, because we want to make sure that we force a single column smaller than that. But we're going to say article text column. We're going to say columns 2, and you can see already that it splits into 2 columns, right? And what this does is, as soon as we get out to this size, so we're at 5601, you can see that it changes, right? And it's going to force 2 columns regardless. And this might actually be, you know, just what we want to do until we get out to, say 900 pixels or larger than that. We might want to force this sort of thing. But what we can do is we can also say column width of, let's say, 300 pixels. And that way, when these column widths, when they shrink and they get less than 300 pixels, they're going to come together into one column. And we should see that happen. About there, yeah. So you can see that we still have, we have our image getting bigger, and because we've gone past 600 pixels. And then about 650, okay, what was that, about 665, these columns get to at least 300 pixels each, and then once that happens, then they break into 2 columns. And then you have your column structure. So for small phablet type situations, you still have a single column. And then as you get larger into iPads like this size, then we have the 2 column structure that we originally wanted in our design. Super basic columns, all it does is take everything in this element and it wraps it. It goes down to the bottom and wraps it back around into 2 columns. One of the downfalls of the columns is that you're only going to get what you see on the page, so it's good for smaller pieces of text like this, or you can create some sort of 2-part section, so each section takes up 100 viewport height or something like that, and then you have a little jump to the next section link or something like that, so that everyone can read on the page all of the text go down and back up. Otherwise, you have to go down and you have to scroll back up, and you got to go down and scroll back up. So that hasn't quite been figured out yet with CSS to create a true structure like that, because with a magazine or a newspaper, you can see everything. You don't have to turn the page or manipulate the page in order to see all of the text, or get down to the bottom and have to go back up. Your eyes can just visually move across the page. So in order to create that, we have to, for longer articles, we have to do some different sorts of things. So just something to keep in mind if you want to use these columns. But they're really great for short text, like if you have something that's just a little section on a page and you want to split it into 2. It's really great for doing that. And when you use columns, you get a margin here because each paragraph has margin on the top and on the bottom. And because of that, you can see that it's not lined up here. So what we do is we come to our article text content, and we say P, and we say and first of type, which is a pseudo selector that chooses the very first of the P type elements, and then we're just going to call margin top of 0. And you can see that it gets rid of the margin for this first element, but it doesn't get rid of the margin for all of these other elements, the P elements. So it gives us a nice crisp line at the top. And that gets us pretty close. So this is our iPad or tablet version. This is our mobile version. And now we need to focus in on this version, which is going to be like a 2-column structure, so 1 column, 2 columns. And I'll show you how to use CSS Grid, but you could also do this because it's just kind of a simple 2-column layout. You could do it with Flexbox as well. Flexbox is actually going to be more more widely accepted across browsers. So maybe I can show you how to do the Flexbox fallback. So what we want to do is when this gets to, let's say, where does it become too much? Let's say maybe 1,000. We'll try 1,000 and see how that works. So at 1,000 pixels, what we want is we want for our app to become display grid, and then we're going to display one half over here, and we're going to display one half over here. Honestly, it would be better to do it at a much larger size, and we could say something like 1200 or something like that. I think might be better. But ultimately what we're going for is this. So we're going to have sort of a 50% look over here, and then we're going to have this 50% over here that has our text. We'll see if this works out very well. So our app comes before our article header, so we're just going to put it, I like to put things in source order as far as my HTML is concerned. That way I can kind of move through the source and move through my CSS at the same time. So we'll say app media and a minimum width of 1200 pixels. Then our app is going to be display grid, and then we're going to say grid template columns 1 FR 1 FR. That should split our grid. Okay. And this is going to give us an interesting look until we get to where we need it to be, which when it gets real big it's going to be like this. And we need to control we need to control this over here so that it goes the full height of the viewport. So that's going to be our article header. So we'll just copy this because it's the height that we really want to change, and we'll say at 1200. Then it's going to be 100, no, not 1000, but 100 viewport heights, or the viewport height. Okay. So you can see that we're going to get this sort of idea when we get out to this size. Now it's going to look a little funky when you first hit that size. So this is 1200 pixels, and we're getting sort of a strange thing going on here, and we can attack that by making some changes to our text. But this is essentially what we plan to have right here. It's a little bit thinner with the picture because it's being sort of blown up, and we can adjust the position of this image as well by going back and adjusting the position here. So we could do center top, maybe bottom. Will it do it? Okay, well you can see it most effectively here. We can control the different parts of the image that are shown. So we can focus more on the bottom. So as it grows from the bottom. You see that? So as the image grows, it grows from the bottom. And then this is left and right. So then you could do left. So it grows from the bottom and the left, or the bottom and the right, or the top. It grows from the top and the right. You can see how everything is being stretched down this way. So you can control backgrounds a little bit with media queries, but we're just going to leave it as is, and we're just going to leave this like it is. We have a little bit of work here to do. So I'm on a pretty large screen, and what I'm going to want to do is break this up into 3 columns, which might help us out. And then there's a lot of space up here, and in order to get that space but also do what I told you, which is to get the text into this section, we're going to have to make some changes. So this is going to have to be smaller, which is okay because you're on a bigger monitor. And then also we're going to have to change this text a little bit. So let's do that. And remember, we have our column width on here, so we're getting sort of a strange single column structure here. So we can change that column width so that it gets so that it's smaller than 300 pixels, so that it forces a different amount of columns, a different width of the columns. Let's start with this, and we'll go back to our article text lead, and it's our H3. So we'll make a new media query here, and we'll say at 1200. We're still gonna, we don't need this text align to the right because it's just doing that. So let's drop the font size back to maybe 1 or 1.21. Let's do 1, and then we'll control the padding as well. That's the padding here. So at 1200 pixels, we're going to say just 3 rem all the way around, or maybe 4 and 3, something like that. So we get kind of what we're looking for there. You can really see it when this gets stretched out. When it gets all the way stretched out, you'll be able to really see it. And then we've got to deal with our text. Okay, so our article text content, this part here, we're going to say at 1200 pixels that we're going to do something like 200. Oh, not 20, but 200. So when we get there, so when we do a smaller size, if we did 400, you would see that it would be 1 column still. But if we go down and we do a smaller size, then it forces, it never gets below, it's always going to be 100 pixels wide. Now if we flip this and we do 3, now we get sort of our 3 column structure that we're looking for, and it almost fits inside of here, but it will fit eventually. So it fits like right there. Where is that? That's about 1400 pixels. Excuse me. So at 1400 pixels, it actually fits. Everything just sort of fits together. We can do a couple of different things. We can massage this text. So we can call our text here and say at 1200, the P element is going to be font size of 0.9 rem, which is going to pull our text down a little bit. If we say 1, that gets us where we were. You could say 0.95. So that gets us sort of where we want to be. I want a little bit more padding here. You can see that there's a little bit more padding on the sides of this section here, and we could do maybe a max width for this section in order to control how much space. So when it grows, it only grows so far. So maybe we want it to be we want it to just sort of look like this. And in fact, we need to line up this edge as well. So we do that by saying article text lead at this size. Actually, it's at all sizes, huh? Here too, we need to line it up on this side. So we're going to say top, right and left, top, right, bottom, and bottom is going to be 3, and then 2. And then here is going to be 4, 0, 4, and 3. Okay, so that lines up our edge really nicely. It does it with the down here too. We can see our edge gets lined up down here a little bit. Could probably afford to create a little bit more padding on there, but we'll just leave it as it is for now. And then we're just going to put a max width on this container here for the text, article text, and we're going to say we might have to put another something in there. Let's just call it and see how it reacts. Maximum width of 600 pixels and a margin of auto. Okay, so it actually does pretty well, but we only want that to happen. You can see that it's putting it here. That's not what we want. We want it to happen here, but we want it to sort of be like that. We can massage this to see if it helps. You can see that once it changes, we do have everything on the page, so that's good. But once it goes out, it sort of evens up all of our columns a little bit and gives us, you know, this is essentially what we were looking for. All right. And that gets us pretty close to where we were. It doesn't quite have the design feel of this with the spacing, but it gets us pretty close. We could get rid of the, we've gotten rid of the margin on there. What could we change in order to give us a little bit more space up here? So we could say 2. That would pull us up a little bit, and on the bottom we could say 5. And so that would give us a little bit more pronounced space up here, and you could sort of massage that a little bit and just see how that works. But you can see that we wind up with this nice like a two up sort of thing, like you would have a whole magazine open, and on the left side of the page will be this nice title, and on the right side would be your article. You could have a link to more text, or you could have this section right here be scrolling so that everything underneath, is hidden. So when you click a little link, this section goes up, and then another section that's hidden comes up into its place, so you can scroll up and down or navigate with some little arrows. There's quite a few different things that you could do here in order to make this sort of what you would want it to be as far as an article is concerned. But hopefully this shows you some of the power, and we didn't even use a whole lot of CSS Grid. We used just a little bit. And I told you that I would show you how to use how to use this with Flexbox. Really, we just need a Flexbox fallback. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say I'm going to say @supports display grid. Now this is really important. So if the browser supports display grid, then you apply this grid code. Otherwise, you need to do whatever is right before it. And then just to show you, we're going to get rid of that. So our grid goes away, and this is what we have when we don't have a grid at this size. And if you just do your grid code without this @supports, this is what you're going to get on Internet Explorer or any what do you call it, browser that doesn't support CSS Grid, which is only about 15 or 14% or something like that at this point. But this is what's going to happen at this size. And some of those that don't display grid very well are on mobile, so we're not using it until we get all the way out here at 1200 pixels. So most browsers, except for older Internet Explorer and stuff like that, are not going to be affected by the grid code. And if we really want to make sure that we have full compatibility, Flexbox is almost universally accepted for any browsers, including Internet Explorer. So we're going to say app display flex, and so we get our code here, and then we need to express our article header. It's got 100% or 100 viewport heights, but now we need to express it as far as its width is concerned. So then we'll say a width of 50 viewport widths. And once we do that, we get our picture back, because what it was doing was essentially collapsing this because it had a width of auto, and so it was only going as wide as this text. Because remember, this is a background image. This is not an actual element. It's just like a hole in the page that you fill in with a background. So if we take this background out, all you would see is this actual element in there. So when we give it an expressed width of 50 viewport widths, which is half, so 50 is half of 100, then we get the nice, we get essentially the same layout, right? So you see how, you can use Flexbox just to do sort of a simple, just sort of a simple layout where you have a two-column layout like this, where you have two major sections split in the middle, or you can use CSS Grid, either one. And so that gives us that. And then when we come back and we add in our grid code, you can see that nothing changes. Okay, so if we don't have our grid code applied, it stays the same. And if we do have grid applied, then it also stays the same. And that's because Google Chrome actually does support CSS Grid, and I'll show you. So you can see that this is what our article looks like out in the wild. So this will be just like a regular website. And then when we look at our grid, we look at the app, you can see that it's applying the grid styles here, right? But if we were to take those styles away, now it's applying our display flex styles, so it doesn't really matter whether we have grid turned on or not. It's going to show up the same way with this two-column layout. So for anything that does not have that, let's see, let's actually check it in Internet Explorer. This might be overkill for you, but it's a good lesson in browser compatibility as far as CSS Grid is concerned. And let's put our code in here, and let's see how it looks. Maybe. Okay. So even in Internet Explorer, we're going to get the sort of look that we're looking for. It's not completely the same. There are some things that could be changed here. You can see that we're getting, it's a little better spacing and things like that here when we're using CSS Grid. But we could actually manipulate this spacing so that when we get out to even larger sizes, let's say 1600 or 1700, that we begin to manipulate the space even better. I'm not going to go ahead and mess with that now. It looks fine the way it is right here. And then as we go out and we get to that maximum width, it still looks fine. Alright, I hope this was maybe not too boring. I hope it was really informative on showing you how easy it is really to just create these, to create a more interesting web. This is not just your normal header image with the text underneath, and we have that, you know, we have that sort of boring type of look here, even though it's jazzed up a little bit. But you can see that once you get out to a full spread, like, you can really do magazine style spreads, and there's a lot more that you can do with CSS columns and with CSS Grid as well. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comment section below. Go back through this and try to understand some of the concepts that I'm talking about. A lot of these things are just base CSS and HTML. It's not super difficult. But if you do have any questions, just let me know, and I'll try to get to them as quickly as I can. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel to get more videos. I try to do at least once a week, sometimes more, and you'll get notifications to your email and to your YouTube app if you subscribe to the channel. And please share it if you think that someone will benefit from seeing this, or if your team will benefit from being able to see, you know, kind of what is available as far as design is concerned. Share it with your team, share it with your social network. It really helps the video to be seen, and it helps the channel overall. And you can also follow me on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @BrianHafferkamp. And I'm happy to connect with you there, or talk with you, or any questions that you have about web development, or actually with the code, maybe something you're stuck in. And make sure you check out CodePen. CodePen is what we're using, or what I'm using mostly for the tutorials that I do. It's an online IDE or code editor that you can use, and it's super easy to pull in third-party libraries, and to pull in extra code like jQuery or whatever you're using, and be able to use those in real time with auto updating and some things like that. So it actually allows you to export the code, and you can post that code, you know, onto a server somewhere and have a live website. So there's a lot of really cool things, plus there's a good community around CodePen. And it's free to sign up. Just go to codepen.io and sign up for a new account, and just get in, and you'll be able to use these same tools that I'm using. Alright, well, I think that's a good video. It is going to be Thanksgiving in the United States over the next several days. We're going to celebrate Thanksgiving, so I just wanted to have a nice big video to end the week, and I'm going to be not doing anything as far as the rest of the week for this channel. But have a great week and a great weekend, and take this and apply it and make it your own. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.